Hello.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, how are you, Professor?
Good, good, good.
Okay, let me get the problem. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I have a question regarding the chapter 2
Okay.
about the supply and demand
Okay.
of the country. So
The assignment.
the assignment, yes.
Yeah.
So I made the graph. So
It's chapter 2 and chapter 3.
yeah. Yeah. Well,
And primarily at the end of chapter 3. Go ahead.
Yeah. So so I have to make a graph where like assuming that the domestic market and international market are in equilibrium, right?
Yeah.
Then I have to how does this world price compare to that? Okay, then when I have to show in the question, how does this world price compare to the no trade?
Yep.
Trade pricing country? Then I'm assuming I have to make.
So first of all, you got to read the text. So, but I'll give you a 15-minute or so analysis right now. So first of all, I'm assuming you're familiar with the demand curve and the supply curve and the equilibrium price at any given point with of a product. Here it is. Yes, but this is the equilibrium price of a country in autarky, in other words, without an international trade. The trade is going to be a lot more competitive. So the price that the world price will, that in other words, when this market opens to the world, that price would be at a lower price. Let's say this price here. And let's call this, where are you? Here you are, WP, like William Patterson. Only this time it's world price, all right? Do you understand why? So let's say, I don't know, what product you want this to be?
The motorcycles?
Motorcycles, fantastic. So these are motorcycles. And when only this country, Harley Davidson or whatever, only this country was making motorcycles and selling them, most importantly, in their domestic market, then they were selling them at a higher price, the world price. Why? Because the world price is a lot more competitive, right? They're producing at a significantly lower cost than this specific market. That's what we're assuming. That's what we're assuming. So what will happen now when this specific country opened, right? That's what that question says. What's going to happen when this price, now the world price, is the price of this specific good? Oh, everything under, so everything under the world price will still be supplied by the domestic supply. Do you see that, right? This is the supply curve. But from that point on, from the world price and onwards and up until we reach that demand curve, because that's going to tell us the quantity that we're going to be selling, right? So here is basically the supply curve under free trade based on fractionally the world price, and up to, from that world price and below, whoever can produce it in that country at that lower price, then they're going to be also part of that supply. So what is happening here? Oh, we lose, let's put a different color. We lose this part of the supply curve. What happens in terms of the consumer surplus? Oh, the consumer surplus is all of this, right? From the price, which is this one, and upwards. And underneath the demand curve, right? This is the supply curve under free trade. It used to be up until this price. So therefore we have a gain for the consumers. We have a loss from, which is this triangle, for the for the domestic producer surplus. But we have a gain of the world producers who capture this difference. In other words, this amount up to this point, this quantity will be now domestic supply, and will be consuming rather this additional amount at the world price. What would happen if we have either barriers of trade or tariffs or something like that? Well, then we're going to have a higher price. Have a higher price. Let's say that higher price is, let's call it this one. So we put the tariff on. So what's the tariff? Oh, the tariff is the quantity, right, that we're importing times that tariff that we're importing. How much tariff are we importing? This much. How much? What's the price? In other words, this is price, right? This is price always, and this is quantity, our basic supply and demand curve. So because we impose this additional increase into the price, in other words, this tariff, or it could be a quota, it could be any other barrier event, it would have the same impact. It would have an increase in the domestic price. What will happen? Well, instead of getting the consumers this lower world price, they're going to be paying a higher price. So in other words, they'll be consuming off this demand curve at this new reduced, right? We're going to have, therefore, a reduction in the quantity demanded because we have a higher price because we have the tariff. What happens in terms of consumer surplus? Well, it gets a little bit decreased. This is the new consumer surplus. Everything that's above the price, the new price, that's the world price plus the surplus. And in addition to that, right, it will have to be under the demand curve. So we have a reduction in the demand curve. What happens in terms of the local producers? Oh, they get to produce a little bit extra. How much? This much, up until the price. After that, they still get, in other words, the world producers get to import their good into this price. So this is if this is a tariff. What happens if this is a quota or any one of these barriers, other barriers? It's regulations, it's, in other words, restriction and trade that of course brings the price higher. What happen? And this is a keen insight. It's very important to understand, and that was what happens sometimes in public policy. Well, instead of the government collecting this rectangle, if you may, price times quantity of imports, right? Hopefully you can see it in my scribbles. Instead of the government collecting these tariffs, who's collecting it? The importers. Why? Because they get to sell to this local market at a higher price. Why? Because because of the barriers of entry, a higher new price has been established. So this is the basics. This is what basically is asked in that assignment. Any questions?
Okay. No, it's much better because the textbook like explains it, but it's.
You need to read chapter 3. Very good. Towards the end, especially. And you need to understand the analysis of what happens in terms of the supply and the demand. This diagram is actually there. This diagram is actually there. And then what happens when we have a tariff, and what happens when we have a barrier of entry that increases the price, but isn't necessarily a tariff. This capture, by the way, of what used to be the tariff, or what would be the tariff equivalent by the importers, happens only if, of course, that government that imposes that barrier of entry allows that to happen. If, for instance, it says, yes, but you can import stuff to my country, right? But you're going to be paying X amount of fees equal to these tariffs, right? In a different way, or your regulation has to be environmental regulation, you name it, all these barriers that basically are working as a barrier of entry, but the cost of it equals to this amount of the tariff. And of course, yes, the government gets to keep that tariff amount.
Oh, okay.
And what happens when this happens? Again, we have, yes, an increase or decrease rather of the consumer surplus. We also have a deadweight loss here. We have deadweight losses. Why? Because we have, in other words, a price in the market that's a result of these barriers of entry that makes less of a quantity, right? We're going to be consuming up to that amount that this new tariff gives us. So this triangle specifically here would be a deadweight loss, would be, in other words, a loss of the producer's surplus, right? Yes, and that's it. Now, this is a basic diagram, and this is, of course, short term. What happens in the long run? Well, maybe many things could happen. We could have, for instance, in other words, the supply curve could look a little bit different, or could start, let's say, from up here, because that's the minimum cost after which they're producing, or something like that. Well, because we have all of these imports, you may in fact see that the domestic industry in the long run disappears, right? It's the whole analysis of of a competitive advantage, and how you have two countries. One has perhaps a absolute advantage in the one, or even in the other product, in the two-product world, right? Guns and armaments, or industrial robots and pizzas, whatever that is. So that's again an analysis from chapter 3 of and chapter 2 of the comparative advantage, and therefore how through trade two countries end up better off. Why? Because the one that has a smaller, right, has a comparative advantage into what? Into the production of industrial robots versus what? Versus pizzas. So in other words, they can produce industrial robots only foregoing 100 pizzas, whereas the other country has to forego 200 pizzas to produce one industrial robot, right? That's key understanding the competitive advantage. So therefore, the one country would specialize in industrial robots, the other country would specialize in pizzas, and they would trade, and both of them would be better off. Both of them would be better off. What would be the fair price? What would be for pizzas per industrial robots, or for industrial robots per pizzas? Any place between, right, those two terms of trade, which is in this example, between 101 pizzas for one industrial robots up until 199 pizzas for one industrial robots, right? That's because the one has a cost of 200, right? So after, if it's higher, it's more expensive. That doesn't make sense for them to trade. But the other one has a cost of 100. So anything below that, it doesn't make sense for them to trade. So any place between those two prices, relative prices, you have the possibility of trade. You have, in other words, favorable trading terms. Now, a price that is closer to the one side means that it's more favorable to the one side. A price that's closer to the other side, right? In other words, closer to 200 pizzas, or closer to 100 pizzas, that would favor the one or the other side. And again, that analysis as well between industrial robots and pizzas is a short-term analysis, which means that in the long run, other things may happen as well. For instance, we may no longer, since we're just producing pizzas, we no longer be capable of producing industrial robots. We've lost that industry. Are we worse off or better off? Well, it depends. We are no longer using the resources to produce, that we have in the economy, to produce industrial robots. What are we using them for? Something else. Okay, is this something else a more value-added type of a process? Then we are winners in this international trade. Have we replaced these? Are these resources idle, or are these resources used into a production of something that doesn't really add the same amount of value as industry? Then we are worse off as an economy as a whole. So that's, again, in a nutshell, briefly, these two basic concepts. One was the comparative advantage, right, in terms of trade. And then the other one was that first diagram that we said, which is basically the assignment. Again, at the end of chapter 3, supply and demand, what happens with the world price, what happens with consumer surplus, producer surplus, and in all of these changes. Any questions, Marie?
No, it's much better.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for the explanation.
Okay.
Get a better idea.
Okay, so that's it. So yes, by all means, go back to the textbook, read it, go back to those vignettes that I've posted, right? So there's many videos and whatnot under course material. And see the, you know, the one, for instance, there's one that shows exactly this analysis of tariffs or not tariffs, quotas and whatnot. And once you get the grasp of it, answer your assignment, and that's it.
Yeah, actually, I saw that you posted a recording of a Zoom meeting.
Yes.
But I tried to log in and I put the code that it's in there, but it didn't, it says like the code was invalid. So I don't know if I'm supposed to use the dash because it's the number dash FIN, well, FIN 080 dash something else, or what I was doing wrong because it didn't let me.
There's two different Zooms. Were you able to enter any of those two? Apparently not.
I just tried one.
Take a closer look. It might have to do with the password. Try it without any password.
Okay.
And yes, so basically it was questions like ones we've talked about today. More specifically, though, it was for the Oanda project, right? It's a project that you should be starting this week. It's due at the end of the 7th week. Oanda is a foreign exchange platform, right? So it's a live platform. It's a professional platform. You would create a mock page or a mock account with Oanda, OANDA, and there's also a whole bunch of YouTubes in that assignment that tell you how to use Oanda, and you would monitor a few pairs, right? Pairs. So foreign currency trades in pairs. It's the dollar versus the euro, right? Or the euro versus the dollar, or the US dollar versus the Mexican. So it's always in pairs, right? It's always in pairs. So select 4 of these pairs and also put together a narrative, a story. What's your perspective in us? Why are you looking into these foreign exchange pairs? Let's say you were, for instance, an importer, right? And you're an exporter, right? And let's say, because now this dollar euro parity is a major phenomenon. It's something you need to be understanding since it's happening right now, since it's all around us. And since it will help you in the other project, the LinkedIn project, we'll come to that in a second. So you're an exporter. What are you exporting? Widgets, motorcycles, Harley Davidsons. How many? Oh, $20 million. 20 million, actually, no, 20 million euros. That's how many you were exporting. Where? In Germany, in France, any place that they use the euro. Okay, fantastic. And when did you export them? Oh, we exported them last month, and we were to collect them today. How do you feel?
Wow.
Which was the foreign exchange rate a month ago? Oh, it was 1.1-ish, 1.009, right? 1.1. So in other words, we had a drop from that to parity. Now, in other words, you're losing how much? You were going to be getting, with those 20 million euros worth of motorcycles that you sold, you were going to be getting $22 million US dollars. You're Harley Davidson, you're paying your payroll in US dollars, right? What are you collecting? $20 million you're $2 million short. Is that nice?
No.
No, it's not. It's a big risk.
Yeah.
The big risk. It's the
Mhm.
foreign currency risk. Very real. Very real. And yes, so you would have to take a perspective. Maybe you're a speculator in the FX market. Maybe you're an importer, an exporter, a central bank, you name it, whatever. Maybe you simply have operations, you know, you have a whole bunch of stores all over the world or whatever. You have a distribution network. You're the you know, the Harley Davidson, keep it in motorcycles, distributor in France or whatever, if they have such a thing. I bet you they have. So whatever, so you take a perspective and you say, okay, these are the pairs that I'm looking at least 4. Right, so maybe euro dollar, the dollar euro. Also, you're looking because you're buying stuff also from China. I don't know, the renminbi and the dollar, whatever. Right, depending on the narrative, and you'll be monitoring and looking at these foreign currency pairs throughout these 8 weeks, and then you also going to have a perspective that you're developing, right? Oh, because I'm looking at that as so what could you do? You could have hedged if you were that exporter that was going to be collecting $20 million worth of euros. You could have said, well, what is the future price that the market, the financial market gives me a month from now? Oh, it is, you know, maybe not exactly 1.1, but maybe it is 1.09. Oh, at least you've covered that by buying a future, or by buying an option, or by coming into with your banking institution, or with your FX representative coming out with a forward contract, that has a forward rate for this specific exchange rate. All this information is also in Oanda. You can find it in Oanda. At any rate, you can find for sure and easily the spot market price. In other words, today, what is it going for? So you can therefore build, right, a narrative, and then tell me, okay, what happened in the 8 weeks?
Okay.
And, you know, at least 1 page.
Okay.
Project, not a difficult project. Now, the other project is LinkedIn. So we have several groups in LinkedIn. You participate, you find an article, you read it, right, or a video, YouTube, or whatever, you know, something relevant to our course, and you post it there. And you need to have posted at least 7 of this. So maybe 1 a week to be safe, or maybe a couple a week to be super safe. Why? Why? The idea is that you start to, you know, introduce and become familiar with what's happening in the foreign currency markets, in the international trade situation, all of the above, right? So what's happening around us. So that gives you a better understanding, and that's it. That's the LinkedIn model, LinkedIn project, rather. Not a difficult situation. So that's it.
Okay, and the LinkedIn is just any group, right?
Any of those groups, yes. There is one that's international finance, so that's primarily what we'll be doing in the group, but maybe, you know, you saw an article that's more macroeconomic. Well, there's a macroeconomic group, maybe put it there. It doesn't really matter where you put it. It doesn't matter. To the extent that you're posting stuff that you become a member of the groups and you are posting some stuff, then that's good. That's it. And yes, Marie, not just for you, but for everybody else, because I'm recording it and I'll be posting it, and hopefully people can see it. You start with an A+, right? With an A+. That's what you have right now, an A+. So you need to maintain it. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Well,
any other questions, Marie?
No, not so far. I think I'm okay. If anything, I will reach out to you again.
No problem. Good luck. And
All right.
chapter 2, chapter 3. Very good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Professor.
No problem.
Okay, take care.
Bye-bye.